The trajectory of my journey would take me from Florida to the high peaks of Colorado and into Canada. Through Rocky Mountain National Park, I followed the Continental Divide and the Rocky Mountains into Idaho and Montana. Glacier National Park, Banff, Jasper, and all the lakes and national forests in and around were epic. Eventually, I made my way to the Pacific Ocean, south a bit, down the coast of the USA, and then turned east, southeast towards home, into the now and on the road. 27 days and 8,500 miles. A journey on the road and of the spirit. Like all trips for me, there are two paths that are traversed. The outward journey, which are the places you go and what you experience in the physical world, and the inner journey, which you might call the spiritual journey. There are two quotes from Alan Watts that captured what the inner journey was about on this trip for me. No longer with the world of thought, no longer with the world of abstractions, but with the world that actually is. To let one's mind alone to experience, but not to try to catch hold of one's experience and thought, to let the whole world come to me without interfering with it in any way. On this trip, the key spiritual practice and focus for me was to be in the moment, not to judge and not to try and hold on to any experience, but to accept what would come. Aware, conscious, joyful, and in the moment. Travel and being on the road can quicken the experience of awakening and being present, in the now. Travel is a great thing, a means to experience the world, people, and places, and to learn about yourself. For me, at times, travel was the catalyst for that inward journey. I felt the need to be on the road, to light that spark inside me and ignite awareness. It's always been clear to me about traveling by motorcycle. Being on the motorcycle requires you to be in the now. Thoughts of the past or the future cannot exist for very long when you're on the bike. The nature of the ride is that you're engaged and in the moment. There were new experiences to be had, new adventures to encounter, and things to learn that could only be found by the doing of something new. Sometimes you feel the need to stretch, to exercise your soul in different ways. Maybe it's a spiritual pilgrimage of sorts. Maybe it's the desire to see new things. Maybe it's simply wanting to sit on the motorcycle and roll through the miles. Quite possibly it's as simple as wanting to smell the air and see the sky from a different vantage point, somewhere else down the road. There was that desire to be on the motorcycle and twist the throttle, to answer the call of the unknown and seek new experiences, new places, and new connections with people. It all created a gravitational force that had brought me to this point. Solo travel, overland on the motorcycle, without a firm destination, deadline, or schedule, paves the way for those serendipitous moments and adventures on the road. So if a great adventure unfolds, marked by fireworks and marching bands and a loud celebration of experiences over the journey, well, that would be cool. But if it's simply me carrying a smile on my face and joy in my heart across many miles on the motorcycle, well then, wouldn't that be the trip of a lifetime? As the wheels of the bike would turn, and as the miles in between me and home would add up, I could be sure there would be more than just twists and turns in the road. I was fully open to what was in front of me and for my trip into the now. I was saying goodbye to Jeanette and pulling away from the house. It was a very surreal feeling. I recall it from the last 2 trips. What struck me was that I wasn't thinking about how long I was going to be away. I felt myself slipping into the moment, and my focus was just about being on the motorcycle. There was no apprehension or anxiety. I was simply rolling on the bike. Today's route pointed me in the direction of the Ozarks. The plan was to pass through Memphis on day 2 and make it to Eureka Springs and the Ozarks on day 3. The riding was relaxing, and I listened to a lot of great music as I traveled the interstate out of Florida. Finding my way to a hotel and jump-starting the on-the-road rituals was familiar. Charging devices, processing pictures and videos, messing about with the GPS, and then writing the day's journal, I was back on the road. The heading was northwest. The day was long, the temperature was high, and I was traveling fast. Traveling today brought me about 30 minutes east of Little Rock, Arkansas, and about 2 hours from the Ozarks. The first leg of the trip was about putting the miles in and making my way west. Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas made 5 states today. Moving so fast and not exploring the local places made it hard to develop a well-researched opinion. My lack of desire to slow down was in part because I knew what would have awaited me in Colorado and beyond. I wanted to get to the mountains and out of the 97-degree temperature. The other factor was that the South also has some other elements to consider. After lunch, I made my way through Memphis and thought to pass by Graceland, and that was exactly what I did. I kept going on Elvis Presley Boulevard. It was hot and too touristy for my liking, and the surrounding area was sadly in decline. A quick picture at the sign was all I have of the experience. The South conjures many feelings and a very dark history in the U.S., that of slavery. The Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact on the world brought hope and progress, although in recent times the country had seemed to be regressing. I made a stop at the Moraine Motel, the site of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, and now the National Civil Rights Museum. I was grateful to take a few moments on that corner overlooking the Moraine Hotel, to realize that the world was given someone so hopeful, courageous, and enlightened, albeit for too short of a time. The sameness that connects us all, our humanity, our hopes and dreams, and our collective desire to live a life of joy and well-being is not a function of where you live or the characteristics of that place. The world can be such a polarizing place, and the politics of division don't help either. Travel definitely has the benefit of seeing new places, but also seeing individuals, recognizing what unites us. Leaving Memphis, I headed west on I-40 straight into the sun. Listening to the tunes playing on my helmet created a great soundtrack for the day. The temperature hit 97 again, and after several hours of baking, I was toast. The day felt timeless, and I found myself at a motel in the AC, happy and unpacking for the night. I was on the road for about 9 hours and 501 miles. I was in the now, in that moment. I took a break today from boogieing to Colorado and decided to explore the Ozarks a bit. Traveling northwest of Little Rock, I entered Mount Magazine State Park and the beginning of Ozark National Forest. The riding was more spirited, and the twists and turns were a welcome change from buzzing on the interstate. I made it to Ozark, Arkansas for lunch and had some great barbecue. After a filling meal, I turned the bike on and the temperature gauge read 100 degrees. Hooray for traveling in August. Baking in my gear, I pushed on. Once I was back in Ozark National Forest, the trees provided some sporadic but appreciated cover. I was on the motorcycle. I was revving the engine. I was traveling, exploring, and following my passion. but my knee was hurting a lot. I needed to navigate the pain and distraction of it. I was working on adapting. I was working on taking my awareness and attention elsewhere and focusing on the parts that felt good. I was directing my attention to focusing on gratitude for being where I was, for being here now. Yet the aging process is real, and with it comes stuff. Enjoying the ride and approaching Eureka Springs, the weather turned and the sky opened up. Rain gear on. I arrived in Eureka Springs, a quaint downtown area with lots of interesting, eclectic shops. I picked a hotel right in the center of things, checked in, and got the walk-in rate. Every bit helps. I found my way back to an IPA at the hotel restaurant bar. That beer was well earned, and I savored every sip. The Ozarks and Eureka Springs has its draw, and I'm sure there's more to do and see, but I was just passing through. Ozarks, been there, done that. Colorado was pulling me west. Timeless moment, that's what this day was. I rode 473 miles and was on the motorcycle for 8.5 hours, riding through 3 states. The day was neither long nor short. It happened in what seemed like a blink of an eye, and yet the ground I covered and the terrain I traversed seemed endless. I rode through thunderstorms for over 5 hours. The rain and wind carried me forward and most of my gear held up, except for the puddle of water in my left boot. The last several hours, the blue sky appeared as I made my way west by northwest, and then a final direct west turn onto I-70 in the direction of Colorado. It was a day of extremes. The weather saw to that. At times, the music in my helmet provided a soundtrack to my travels. Other times, the music was the rain and wind pounding on me and the motorcycle. The second hand on the clock and the odometer on the bike had absolutely no control over my state of being. I was in the moment. I was in the now. A lot happened today. From heading out in the rain from Eureka Springs to crossing into Missouri and riding through Mark Twain National Forest to riding through the tall Kansas prairie grassland. Oh, lest I forget the barbecue in El Dorado, Kansas for lunch and the great Mexican food in Hays, Kansas for dinner. A lot happened. It felt like a moment and an eternity at the same time. It was timeless, and it was timeless because all I had was the moment I was in. Today was the final leg of the first phase of the trip, getting to Colorado. It was just how I viewed the trip. This part of the journey, passing into mountain time and into the mountains, represented a new rhythm. I was glad to be on the motorcycle and I was enjoying the ride. Most of the ride today was still in Kansas, and the flat cornfields went on for miles. I left I-70 west to take a smaller state road. The ominous sky appeared out of nowhere across the plains. I was feeling very grateful to be on the motorcycle, just part of the scenery, moving across the landscape, piercing the wind and rain like a rocket. It felt good. Passing the Colorado state line, it was as if the rain knew that it had to stay on the Kansas side. I entered a small town named for Kit Carson. I was making a beeline west to Colorado Springs. I had about a range of 90 miles left of fuel. The final turn onto Highway 94 straight west, and there was a big sign that said no service for 70 miles. The range on my tank at that point said 80 miles. It became a constant math calculation in my head, updating the number of miles I'd have to spare. I kept the speed reasonable to optimize fuel economy and settled in for the lonely and tranquil ride. Cows and horses were my only companions on this stretch of Highway 94. The gas station was a welcome sight, and clearly it had the worn look of having been around a while. I gassed up, hydrated myself, and set out down the road. Within minutes, the tire pressure indicator was down 7.7 psi on the rear. I pulled over, measured the air pressure manually, and confirmed it. As I turned my head to look at the tire, there was the screw. I was screwed in Colorado. I was only 25 minutes from Colorado Springs and Pikes Peak Motorsports. Watching the tire pressure and hoping to make it there without damaging the wheel, I set out in traffic. Those last 15 minutes definitely felt like an eternity, but I arrived. The tire had 10,000 miles on them, and I was due for some new ones anyway. A very minor hiccup, and I felt like I hit the lotto. All in all, not much of an inconvenience. They were able to squeeze me in on a Saturday. It was an opportunity to spend 2 nights in Colorado Springs, rest up a bit, hopefully recuperate my ailing knee, and get ready for some fun in the mountains. Today was a rest day. The bike was serviced, and I was nursing some altitude sickness that was exacerbated by the beers I drank last evening. I picked up the motorcycle, new tires, and 24K service done. Right back to the hotel to do some laundry, hit the gym, and to chill out. The day came and went in a blink. It was a nice break from the road after 5 days of intense riding. Almost a week on the road, and I had found a new rhythm. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of high elevations in Colorado. I'd start the day entering Garden of the Gods. The conclusion of the first week on the journey was marked by a new rhythm on the road. It had to do with finding my groove traveling on the motorcycle. Also, the landscape had changed. Mountains and twisty roads put a big smile on my face. Today started with a ride through Garden of the Gods and the Red Rock formations. I was on my way to Pikes Peak, America's mountain. Pikes Peak is the highest summit in the Rocky Mountains in North America. At over 14,115 feet, I definitely felt the altitude. The sun was out and the views were for miles. The ride to the top delivered a temperature drop of over 25 degrees, which I welcomed. I was above the clouds and watched them roll by. It's about the people you meet. Nature, riding, and the outdoors are aspects of the journey. But the people you meet and their stories, well, that's what traveling is all about. The wonderful thing about hearing other people's stories and sharing my own is that very quickly it becomes clear how connected we are and how same we are. There's no politics, religion, or judgment. Simply, people are connecting around a common theme, travel. There's always some common bond that is a doorway into the bigger truth that we're all human beings. All it takes is a little effort to listen to one another without judgment, to have empathy, and to recognize the human condition that is the same for all of us. Just a little effort is needed, and the rest is effortless. Sometimes all it takes is a smile. Descending Pikes Peak, the temperature climbed and it was way hot again. I knew a road trip on the bike in August would entail high temperatures and some rain. I didn't anticipate the extent to which that was true. I thought getting to the mountains meant it would cool down considerably and be drier out west. Over the last week, it seemed like the rain gear came out almost every day. I headed north to Evergreen. As I continued in Pikes Peak Forest, I could see in the distance around the various mountain peaks dark cloud formations. It became apparent that the rain gear was going to come out again. Back on my route, it was a deluge. I was beginning to get pelted with sugar cube-sized hails. Eventually, I stopped for gas and to seek shelter.
Can't believe it's hailing.
I made it to Evergreen and a small quaint town. I was done for the day. I found a nice inn, and it was in walking distance of the town, even though the knee was still not cooperating. I took a walk into town, a burger, a beer, and then Rocky Road ice cream for dessert. Tomorrow, Mount Evans. Waking up to the shining sun and a wonderful breakfast in Evergreen at the inn, I was ready for a great day of riding. There were no clouds in the sky, and I was excited to climb to the top of Mount Evans. The ride to Mount Evans and Echo Lake was a spectacular precursor to what was to come next. The mountains and forests kept coming as I rolled on the throttle and leaned the bike into the twists and turns. I arrived at the entrance to Mount Evans Scenic Byway, and to my surprise, my annual National Park Pass was accepted. Jackpot. No additional fee, unlike Pikes Peak. I started the ascent up, and the expansive views overloaded my senses. I quickly brought my attention back to the hairpin turns. The riding was awesome, and it was reminiscent of motorcycling in the European Alps. The difference being the elevation here significantly exceeded any of the alpine passes in Europe. The summit of Mount Evans is at an elevation of 14,130 feet. It's the highest paved road in North America. The temperature dropped over 30 degrees by the time I was at the summit, and the wind made it feel even colder. In the low 40s and windy, but the sun was strong. At the top, I felt the altitude and made an effort to take deep breaths to avoid feeling lightheaded. Mountain goats were climbing the rocks and making their way toward the human intruders. People were hiking out on some trails. I was grateful to pause and just be there. This was the experience I was hoping for, and it energized me. I hung out in the cold air for a while, appreciating the vast, never-ending mountain range and peaks in the distance. The ride up to the summit of Mount Evans definitely took the trip to great new heights, and it fueled my desire to keep going. The way down was easier, albeit I still navigated the hairpins, damaged road, and slow cars. In no time, I was riding past Echo Lake on another great road in the direction of Idaho Springs for lunch. As I descended the high elevation and eventually rolled into Idaho Springs, the temperature had climbed 40 degrees. Sweaty and hungry, I parked the bike and made my way to find some Colorado-style pizza. As a side note, riding in Colorado was a different experience in the sense that your olfactory senses every now and then encountered a cloud of weed. Whether it was a passing dispensary or the driver in front was indulging, make no mistake, there was cannabis burning. I was heading north through the forest and mountains on several spectacular roads. Suffice to say, the motorcycling around here rocked. I was on my way to Lyons, Colorado to visit friends. Spending time on this journey connecting with people you know was special. They gave me the gift of their time, friendship, and wonderful hospitality. Breakfast with friends was magical. The hummingbirds were doing their thing, their dog was jumping about, and we were conversing some more over coffee. I said my thank yous, said goodbye, and continued my northwest trajectory. On the bike, revving the engine, pushing through the gears, and leaning into the turns, I arrived at Estes Park. I was ready to enter Rocky Mountain National Park and ride Trail Ridge Road, across several mountain passes to Grand Lake on the west side of the park. A caravan of cars, motorcycles, and other vehicles were trekking along Trail Ridge Road. It was about 48 miles and it was not up and back. It runs from Estes Park in the east to Grand Lake in the west. You have the feeling that you're going somewhere. The views are big and breathtaking. In the distance, vehicles were specks of dust traversing the road that took you higher and higher in elevation. Long stretches, a hairpin, and then you were climbing again. Approaching Grand Lake, the descent commenced. Elevation dropped and temperature rose. Before I knew it, I had blown through Trail Ridge Road with the feeling that I should have stopped more to take pictures, but I was enjoying the ride too much to stop. The scenery changed by Grand Lake, namely the lake. I continued west through a national forest, then north and west across the Continental Divide. Next was Rabbit Ears Pass, from east to west. You wouldn't know it if not for the sign. There are many mountain passes that leave you with the impression of having just gone over a road at some higher altitude. It wasn't that dramatic twist and turn climbing your way up and over the peak of some mountain. Well, it was still a mountain pass, and I crossed the Continental Divide. Very cool. Turning north, I was in Steamboat Springs, circling about and calling around for a hotel. I finally picked a place. Walking into the lobby above the front desk was the following quote: "Live, travel, adventure, bless, and don't be sorry. Jack Kerouac." It was a great sign and message for me, and I took it as such, but there was no rooms available. I was out and looking for accommodations elsewhere. It was a worthwhile stop if just to receive that message. I found another hotel pretty quickly. It was a great feeling to settle in off the bike after a long day. 9 days on the road and over 2,500 miles. The days were blurring together and I was having to work to keep track. What day was it? How many days on the road? My mind went to tomorrow's route and the plan for the coming days. To travel fast to Glacier National Park, or to spend some time in Idaho at Salmon National Forest. I'd let the road figure it out for me tomorrow. Temperatures in Steamboat started at a brisk 55 degrees. Setting course northwest with anticipation of getting closer to Glacier National Park in the coming days. Today was spent riding through Colorado and into Wyoming. The riding today through Colorado and into the high cold desert of Wyoming presented an expanse of road that went on forever. The sun was out and the blue sky was a welcome sight. I was at the stage of the trip where I felt that I needed to do some planning and make a decision for the coming days. Ultimately, I wanted to get to Glacier National Park by the end of the week and Canada over the weekend. Today and tomorrow would be about clocking some miles. By the time I reached Jackson, it was in the mid-80s. Great temps and riding conditions. On the previous 50 at 50 journey, I met a guy in Paunia, Colorado, who had a lot of good things to say about Salmon, Idaho, and the Salmon National Forest. So the impetus for today's route was born. I woke up to a brisk 45 degrees in Jackson, Wyoming. Over coffee, I exchanged travel plans with a bunch of other travelers. I was speaking with a guy about all the places to go, and I was emphasizing my desire for travel not to be about a checklist and to stay focused on being in the moment. He smiled and said, "Be here now." On that note, I returned the smile and wished him safe travels. Small serendipitous messages from impromptu conversations. I made my way over Teton Pass, coming from the opposite direction compared to my last visit. To be so far from home and to have revisited this place was a good feeling, a feeling of being a traveler. I quickly crossed the state line and I was in Idaho, and literally passing a truck full of potatoes. On the way to Salmon, I followed the Sacagawea Historic Byway. The primary portion was 120 miles on Idaho 28, with views of the mountains and the high plains that were serene and alluring. Heading north into the Bitterroot Mountains, I was traversing part of the Lewis and Clark Trail, that same expedition that Sacagawea led them on. Parts of the same route I was on was also the Nez Perce National Historic Trail, taken by the tribe of the same name when attempting to flee the U.S. cavalry and head to Canada. There's an incredible amount of history and significance in all of this. It left me feeling that I should have paid a bit more attention in elementary school and history class. More deeply, it got me thinking about the incredible expeditions that opened up the frontier of what is now the U.S. and the casualties of that so-called progress. The U.S. has a dark history and a dark origin, from the genocide of Native American people to slavery. Heading over Lost Trail Pass from Idaho into Montana, the temperature dropped and the descent on US 93 carried me forward. The ride on 93 from Salmon through Montana was peaceful and the fragrances in the air flowed through my helmet. As I approached Darby, the ominous end-of-days clouds appeared over the mountain range between where I was and Missoula. There was an inn, and as I entered Darby, Montana, I settled in and unpacked. It was a great place for the night and an opportunity to meet interesting people. No pictures or video, I was just too engaged in conversation. The innkeeper had a radiant smile and her hand showed the hard work over the years. It was a reminder that the joy derived from living in the moment also requires the doing. Her story, the sound of wind chimes, and the smell of firewood burning in an open pit outside gave me the feeling that I was right where I was supposed to be. 3 retired couples were in an open 4x4 buggy, and they were staying for the night. After cleaning the bike, I chatted with a guy sitting alone next door on the porch. He was hiking the Pacific Coast Trail, from the Mexico-California border to Canada. I spent the time to hear all their stories and share mine. People connecting on the road. That's what travel's about. Making my way further north in the direction of Glacier National Park was a simple goal today. No rushing about and plenty of time. I was heading to Kalispell for the night. It would be 1 hour from the park. Leaving the inn, I rode about 30 minutes and stopped in Hamilton, Montana for breakfast. I stopped at the Coffee Cup Cafe. It was packed. Clearly it was a local place where most people knew one another. I sat down next to an older couple, easily in their mid to late 80s. The stories commenced, but that'll be saved for the book, should that happen one day. The morning air was brisk and welcomed. I headed through Missoula. As I rode further north, I lost track of the names of the various lakes and national forests I was passing through. Salmon Lake, Lolo National Forest, and a bunch of others. It was a calm ride and I was grooving with the road, just flowing and listening to the wind through my helmet. Following my breath in rhythm with the road. Traveling to reach a destination and see something unique? Yes, that can be a goal. Traveling as a getaway or vacation from day-to-day routine life, rest and relaxation, that's something easily understood. Traveling to have an adventure and push your limits, maybe that's another reason. Possibly the simple answer is travel to experience without any expectation or preconceived notion of what is to come. Just to travel, to journey, and to let experiences and all the moments pass through you. I've been passing through so many places. Being present and in the moment allows you to really experience the fullness of life. Maybe it's a bit of paradox, to be able to have such a deep experience in any moment, but not to be able to hold on to the totality of those moments. What's left is the essence and feeling from having experienced something. To recognize that each moment fades away and in its place is the now, the current moment you're in. It's about the essence of it all and how each moment shapes you, connects you to your higher self, to the universe, that leads to just being joyful. I think about waves pounding on a granite cliff, the wind hitting the mountains, and the rain dropping from the sky impacting the earth. All the elements of nature over time shaping what appears as an immovable solid mountain into something unique. Maybe we're that granite cliff, and each moment and each experience are those things that shape us into something grand and something unique. Travel is a way to open yourself to a wealth of new experience. It shapes you. Arriving in Kalispell early, it was a good feeling. It gave me the opportunity to catch up on some responsibilities. I quickly decided to give myself the gift of a rest day and spend 2 evenings. The next part of the journey really would be a new phase, Glacier National Park and crossing into Canada. I wanted to reflect on exactly where I was and how I ended up here. I was in Montana, 1 hour from Glacier National Park. More meaningful than the physical place, I was in a place of calmness and stillness. It was a feeling, and I found my attention moving to my breath at various times today. It was automatic, finding my breath and the moment, peaceful. Today marked 2 weeks on the road, and it seemed appropriate that I was going to be riding through Glacier National Park. Each day on the road had its own rewards, but today was particularly meaningful. It was a celebration of what had been experienced, more so than what had been achieved. Yes, I traveled many miles, over 3,800, through numerous states, and now on this day I would enter Canada. What really was meaningful for me was how much I had experienced in 14 days. Each day gave the gift of newness, and the experiences flowed through me. I tried to stay out of the way and just let it all happen, without judgment of what it all meant. However, this day did seem like one of those days that had a bit more significance for me. It wasn't about what I did and where I went. It was completely about realizing a vision and a dream. It was totally about manifesting an idea that I played with over the years. Wouldn't it be cool to ride through Glacier National Park in Montana and then head to Banff in Canada? That was the idea, just an idea that became a vision for the trip, then turned into a feeling of something that would be done. The number of miles and the line on the map representing the last 14 days, well, those were outcomes to be proud of for sure. It was a sense of accomplishment. The thing that put the big smile on my face was idea, vision, and manifesting a dream. That was a feeling of reaching new heights, and that was something joyful. I left Kalispell, Montana, and was less than an hour from the west entrance to Glacier National Park. Riding under the sign and through the entrance, it was a feeling of reaching new heights. I was riding past Lake McDonald and joining the Going to the Sun Road. Across the Continental Divide at Logan Pass. The landscape was awe-inspiring, majestic, and powerful. The mountains and glaciers that formed the park over the millennia were just doing their thing. They were a living thing, existing and changing over time. What forces were at play? The energy that moves through all of this stuff, that manifests all of this beauty, there are forces at play. I felt honored and grateful to witness it all and to be in the moment. No longer with the world of thought, no longer with the world of abstractions, but with the world that actually is. To let one's mind alone to experience, but not to try to catch hold of one's experience and thought. To let the whole world come to me without interfering with it in any way. Descending from Logan Pass and continuing through the park, I found myself exiting through the east entrance of Glacier National Park. I pulled off the road, turned the engine off, and paused for a bit. I looked back at the rugged peaks lining the Continental Divide and at the breathtaking sight that I just moved through. The wind was whipping about, but I felt a stillness in my breath and in my being. There was no thought, no judgment, and no analysis of what occurred. I simply felt joyful, with a smile on my face and feeling completely content to be exactly where I was at that moment, a new height. Before I knew it, I was at the US and Canada border. Passing through the US border checkpoint and then Canada, I was snapping a picture at the Welcome to Alberta Canada sign. I was already on the bike for 4 hours, and there was another 4 hours to Banff, but I was energized by the experience. I throttled on for hours with a smile on my face. Many miles of farmland before reaching Calgary and adjusting my course due west. Pulling into Banff was another surreal experience. It was part of the dream, and I was there. Strolling down Banff Avenue, I was elated. There was a hustle and bustle of vacationers, but not too crowded. It was a real diverse mix of people converging in Banff, which gave the place an even more interesting vibe. I celebrated the day and 2 weeks on the road with a great meal and a few too many glasses of wine. It was time to go to Dreamland now, so I made my way back to the hotel, put my head on the pillow, and fell into a deep sleep. What a ride. A double overnight in Banff gave me the opportunity to sleep in a bit more. I took a walk and had a nice breakfast. I might have guzzled a bit too much coffee, but it was good. The weather was awesome, and I had a loop planned. It was a quick ride up a few switchbacks, and I was at the Mount Norquay ski area. I bought a ticket and hopped on the rickety chairlift for the 8-minute ride to the top. It was quiet at the top, and the views of the Rockies, lakes, and Banff down below was simply a beautiful picture painted by the universe. every mile through all kinds of weather over the last couple of weeks gave way to this moment on top of Norquay, and it was well-deserved and experienced with immense gratitude. The chairlift ride down was another opportunity to soak it in, the views and the energy of the place. I rode by Lake Minnewanka, Bow Falls, the iconic-looking Fairmount Banff Springs Hotel, and Sulphur Mountain. It was a treat to leisurely ride around town. I was glad to get a feel of it all. Tomorrow I would head to Jasper, and the route there I was sure would be full of splendor as well. Today was the culmination of the spark that ignited this trip, Banff and Jasper. I believe I was as far north as I was going to go on this current journey. The ride from Banff to Jasper, while only about 200 miles, amounted to over 6 hours on the road. The day was full of immense natural beauty. The Canadian Rockies are immense and occupy a region far and wide. In no time, I found myself escaping the Trans-Canada Highway 1 for 1A, the lesser-traveled Bow Valley Parkway on the way to Lake Louise. What a great ride! The air was filled with the scent of Christmas in August. The undulations of the road, well, that produced a rhythm that was peaceful. The massive peaks of the Rockies were ever present. As I arrived in Lake Louise, the fancy Fairmont Chateau was off to the side. The glacial water and the canoes drifting across with what appeared to be a glacier as a backdrop didn't seem real. A picture painted by the universe.
I don't know if it's on selfie mode. Hold on, is that selfie mode?
There it goes.
Stay there.
Heading to Moraine Lake, it was an entity in and of itself. I was mesmerized by the glistening turquoise water. The twinkling of the sun on the lake was like a constellation of stars in the night sky. I ate lunch outside by the lodge. chatting with fellow travelers and enjoying letting the time pass. It was effortless. Leaving Moraine Lake, I was on the Icefield Parkway, 93, heading toward Jasper. The mountains took a different form, and the terrain changed as I made my way closer to Jasper. The peaks were tall and the mountains massive. Now, the tops of the mountains at times gave a feeling of a lunar landscape, something extraworldly. A brief stop at Peyto Lake. Navigating the tourists, I snapped a bunch of pictures. The colors, so turquoise, it looked as if the universe itself was enhancing what I was seeing in real time. How could these colors happen in nature at such a scale? The vastness of the area that contains the Rockies is only rivaled by the sheer awesomeness of the mountain peaks, alpine lakes, and glaciers. Glistening turquoise lakes of glacial water, ice-capped jagged mountain peaks, and sea-foam glacial rivers of runoff flowing down from those high peaks was the setting for this day. Where to begin without sounding like a laundry list of cool stuff? Riding the Icefield Parkway and passing by the Columbia Icefield reminded me that what I was seeing was uniquely this place. The landscape, the terrain, the colors, and the sheer ominous presence of the glaciers were specific to this part of the world. The fast-moving seafoam green glacial water flowed through fields of streams on the side of the road. If not for the road, I don't see how this land could be easily navigated. There was no climax to having arrived in Jasper, just the recognition that I was there. I did it. It was a good feeling, and my attention turned to finding a hotel, a shower, and a beer. Fast forward to the community table at the Jasper Brewery, the cold IPA, and a conversation with a newly married couple from Edmonton. The day was complete. The adventure would continue. I left Jasper and it was a brisk, sunny morning. When you're listening to a good song and feeling the vibe, you're not concerned with the notes or the arrangement. You're feeling the music. The song moves your soul. You experience it and you feel it without any judgment and without the need to label it in any way. That's how I was feeling about this trip and the ride this day. Moving through the landscape on the motorcycle, I contemplated what I was feeling. I was searching for words, possibly words I had written previously in this journal, or words that I read in a book over the years. I was searching for words to label, to model, to characterize, to try and explain what I was feeling. I was searching for that eloquent soliloquy in my head that would speak to the experience I was having. It struck me plainly. I was simply being. I was a being simply being. No words necessary and no explanation needed. The music of my life was playing. Why be concerned about the notes? By the time I arrived in Kelowna, more than half of the 6.5 hours of riding was in the rain. I was wet, muddy, and physically spent. Yet the ride was a blink of an eye. Most of the day, like the previous days riding in Canada, have been through remote and rugged terrain with grand views. Today, I spent most of my time in British Columbia, a new province for me. The landscape changed to include more forest views, and the colors of the lakes no longer had those glacial hues. I was feeling joyful and at the same time still. Even as I traversed the gears of the motorcycle, through corners and straightaways, turning the throttle, leaning the bike side to side, velocity constantly changing, and yet there was a stillness. What was it like? I guess you'd have to be there. How often have we used or heard that expression? It's because words fail and fall short. Explain what wine or food tastes like, or tell me what the song sounds like, or what the color of a flower looks like. It's all words. It's the being and experiencing that matters. In the moment, there are no words necessary. Kelowna and the Okanagan Lake area in British Columbia's wine region, need I say any more? After sampling some of the wine while in Banff and hearing about the rave reviews, it was an easy decision. A large number of boutique wineries in the Okanagan area and Kelowna made it a great base camp for a double overnight. I woke up early, which was easier since I gained an extra hour crossing into British Columbia yesterday. Learning about the Kelowna area and the wines, I quickly booked a wine tour for the day. It would be a tasting at 5 vineyards on Okanagan Lake and a stop for lunch. The bike was parked and I was ready. My ride arrived. The amount of money invested in the vineyards in this area to me was staggering, given the production and limited distribution. Opulent tasting rooms and bistro restaurants, all with great tunes playing in the background, and most importantly, drinkable and enjoyable wines across a range of varieties. I could only deduce that the owners made their money elsewhere and the vineyard was their passion. As a consumer and enthusiast, I was just happy to enjoy the surroundings and great food, as well as the impressive wines. Definitely a place I will come back to. After a full day of indulging, I headed to downtown Kelowna and Okanagan Lake. I was dropped off by the tour guide and said my farewells to the group. I walked around Kelowna by the lake. People were swimming, walking about, and it seemed like everyone had an ice cream cone. It was a day full of unexpected surprises about a region I didn't anticipate. This was an area that would warrant another visit one day soon. Tomorrow, I was going to visit some friends in Washington State before exploring the rugged coast into Oregon. I crossed the border into the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. to touch the Pacific Ocean once again. The bike was clean and I was excited to be heading back to the USA today. 15 minutes into the ride, it was raining once again. That's just how it goes. As I made my way out of the Kelowna area and crossed the bridge over Okanagan Lake, It felt both like another day on the bike and also like another moment to be cherished. The idea of having come this far and heading to Washington State energized me. The ride was exciting, and the forest-covered mountains and lakes in British Columbia were inviting. The clouds rolled across the peaks as if it was a time-lapse video, but I was seeing it in real time. Rugged and remote once again was the feel of the environment. Hours passed and I chose to cross the border at Sumas to avoid Vancouver, BC traffic. It was still a 1 to 2 hour wait to get across the Sumas border. Even though I was about 3,400 miles from home, crossing the border back into the USA brought a sense of being that much closer. I was 30 minutes from Bellingham, Washington, and set course to visit friends. It was really a special feeling to connect with people you know while on the road, in a setting that was so very different. Serendipitous encounters with friends and family was a fitting welcome home to this first day back in the U.S. It was a short ride today. I had a friend who I worked with about 20 years ago who lived in Kingston, Washington, which connects to Olympic National Park. It was a brief ferry ride to the peninsula. I bought tickets, boarded the ferry, and lined up by the other motorcycles on the boat. Quick and beautiful ride across from the mainland. I barely had time to query the other motorcyclists for some local routes. Once stopped, the line of bikes left the ferry like the start of MotoGP. It was like a video game through the twists and turns. I texted my friend and he showed up for a reunion at the cafe. It was comfortable, and the 20 years in between now and our last encounter had no significance. We talked about the many things that led up to all of us being exactly where we were at that moment. The conversation was effortless. Time wasn't a factor. It was a great thing. A great night's sleep, although a bit chilly, I woke up and got ready for the day, anticipating an early start. As I moved through the Olympic National Park, passing Port Angeles and on the way to Forks, what few dark clouds existed all moved into the background. The horizon was clear and sunny. Riding Crescent Lake was a joy. The road along the lake was a ribbon of twisty goodness, and the bike leaned side to side, with the throttle revving through the corners. The fragrant air from the lake and forest moved through my helmet as the motorcycle carried me forward. Big smiles in my helmet, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was the last day of my third week on the road, and this day was a clear celebration of 3 weeks on the road. Hours passed and the miles added up. I found myself within minutes of the Pacific Ocean. The trip meter since I left Boca Raton was now clicking past 5,000 miles. It was just a number, like 21 days on the road is a number. Yet it was an indication that stuff happened, and was happening. people interactions of the last couple of days and the range of experiences over the 3 weeks have been a gift. In many ways, I felt like the architect of this experience and of the joy I was feeling. Yet there were forces at play, serendipitous occurrences, and energy I was also feeling that was a gift from the universe. I arrived in Long Beach, Washington for the evening. After settling into the hotel, I took a walk to the beach. The seagulls were in flight, the wind was blowing, the tide was coming in, and the glimmering sunlight in the surf was magical. The sound of the waves, the wind through my hair, and the smell of the ocean, it all brought me even deeper into the experience. People were walking along the beach, some were flying kites, kids were playing in the sand. It was all a symphony of stillness, and I experienced it all in a timeless moment. As the tide receded, I followed the surf to touch the ocean. Just like on my last cross-country experience, a handshake was exchanged with the Pacific Ocean in an act of gratitude. I could go no further west. It was time to make that easterly turn tomorrow and begin the journey home. Local steamed clams, a couple of glasses of wine, and ice cream, of course, concluded the celebration of that evening. I knew that tomorrow would bring me one step closer to home, and that was a good thing. 3 weeks on the road and innumerable timeless moments full of wonderful experiences. On the conclusion of week 3, it was meaningful to celebrate by touching the Pacific Ocean. I had concluded over the last several days that today would be the day to make that easterly turn and begin to chip away at the miles between where I was and getting home. I started the day as if it was just another one, on the road, with excitement for the ride and no quota of miles to do. I rode south down US 101, crossing into Oregon from Washington early in the morning. A strong sun and brisk air, with a constant ever so slight haze hanging over the shoreline, was the setting for the ride. I arrived at Cannon Beach, Oregon, and the iconic rocky shore with outcroppings of massive rocks sat conspicuously in the ocean. Haystack Rock and the other iconic rock formations uniquely define the Oregon coastline. The morning ride and the Oregon coast with quaint beach towns was a parting gift. I rode a bit more down the coast to Manzanita before saying goodbye and turning east. Twisty, lonely roads brought me inland, and the temperature began to rise. As I moved closer to McMinnville, I was entering wine country. There were fields of vegetables, hazelnuts, and finally vines as far as the eye could see. Arriving in McMinnville, an historic downtown in the heart of Willamette Valley, I stopped for lunch. The streets were dotted with tasting rooms, and clearly this place could have been a good base of operations for wine tasting. I had contemplated a double overnight, or at least one night here to immerse myself in the Oregon wine experience, but the route home was calling me. I felt complete and that the trip had served its purpose. I still had about 3,200 miles to go, which I was targeting to complete in the next 6 days. The trip wasn't over, but it was clearly going to be primarily about moving fast and heading home. I was contemplating the 3,200 miles, and there was a recognition that was more to do, and yet a feeling that it was all complete. With gratitude for the experience, it was now an opportunity to ride home with a feeling that blessed things happened each day. I had a spectacular experience over the last 3 weeks. Innumerable timeless moments filled with wonderful experiences that I know had shaped me. I passed near Portland traffic before turning to follow the Columbia River. I was on the Columbia River near Cascade Locks, Oregon. As good a place as any to call it a day. The Pacific Ocean was behind me and home was down the road. Today was the first day of what might be termed the big push, the beginning of 3,200 plus miles returning home. However, it didn't feel like a big push. The bike was moving fast on the interstate, but I was sitting perfectly still on the motorcycle. Still on the seat as the bike carried me forward at 80 plus miles per hour. There was a stillness inside. The day started following the Columbia River on I-84 East. I was surprised how beautiful riding on an interstate could be. The Columbia River Gorge and the Dalles Dam provided an iconic backdrop to the ride. The day progressed and the distance between me and the Columbia River increased. Into Idaho, the heat of the day followed me and the goal was to keep moving and let the air flow. The temperature, the buffeting of the wind, and the traffic were all part of the isness of the day. This was just the way it was. This trip had the effect of rooting me more firmly in the moment, in the now. There was an acceptance of the miles over the coming days. There was something to be done and something that would be achieved. My attention was focused on sitting still on the motorcycle, relaxed and yet engaged fully in the ride. Twisting the throttle, leaning the bike, looking far and wide and moving through the environment as my breath was relaxed. There was a rhythm to it all and an orchestra of activity happening. I was there witnessing everything. I was simply sitting still at 80 miles an hour. I had planned on getting home to Florida in 5 days. There was a hurricane on a potential track to impact the state. If I wasn't home before the storm made landfall, I would have to wait it out somewhere else for several days. Clearly, more daily miles would need to be traversed. So, I was in effect in a race with a hurricane. Rising early and hitting the road, each day now going east, I would lose an hour and adjust to the time change. Miles and miles of straight riding. I had 1,400 miles to go over the next 2 days. I was hoping the hurricane would not impact gas supplies once in Florida, but there was nothing I could do about it, so I hoped for the best. I've talked about how there are so many experiences in a day, innumerable experiences, and that being in the moment produces this sense of timelessness. Experience happens, and it could be minutes, hours, or days, and there isn't a sense of elapsed time. There are just moments. I rode 652 miles on this day and was on the road for 10.5 hours, not including breakfast, the prep, and cleaning up afterward. Sounds like a long day on the motorcycle, and it was. Sounds like a lot of miles, and it was. Did it feel like 10.5 hours? What does that even feel like? It was as if time had no relevance on this day. I felt as if I was catapulted through the experience of the day, just slipping through and into moment after moment. That was the feeling every day on this journey. Sitting on the motorcycle is a meditation, a practice, a discipline. Maybe it's a form of yoga. The act of being in the saddle and feeling fused with the motorcycle and the environment is an active dance that is effortless and timeless, where I am part of the experience and separate at the same time. I'm animated on the bike, engaged, and aware of all that needs to be coordinated and done. It flows and happens. Yet, I am there and still, in awareness, just seeing it all happen. When I reflect on 10.5 hours on the bike, or I think about tomorrow's long ride, there follows some uneasiness. However, when I know that it will just happen and I simply just have to be, then the doing of it all becomes timeless. It just becomes timeless moments and yoga on the motorcycle. What a glorious fucked up riding day that was challenging for all the wrong reasons. 12.5 hours to ride 685 miles. I should have been about 200 more miles down the road, or at least finished 3 hours earlier. 2 hours of being pelted by rain and the wash from trailer trucks. No visibility. Boy, was it dangerous. I was thankful that those tires really displaced the water on the road. St. Louis traffic wasn't that bad. Into Illinois, then Kentucky. Nashville at rush hour, traffic accidents, and super messed up traffic everywhere. A detour, and I think I added more time. Chattanooga, and boom. There was 25 miles or so of backed up traffic. Riding in the shoulder, just go. All the hotels were booked. Fast forward to the nighttime riding, I made my way to I-75 into Georgia. The day was long, in hours and miles, and I was feeling it. 700 plus miles more tomorrow. I would arrive at home. How did I get home? What had just happened? This was day 27 on the road, and I had no sense of elapsed time. The trip seemed like it had been my reality for longer than I could remember, and yet now it was the last day on the road for this journey. Well, it was a blink of an eye. I think that's true of all experiences. When it's gone and past, it feels like an instant. It's only when you reflect on the experiences you've had, big or small, that you realize there have been innumerable timeless moments to recount. Stuff happened, and it was good. Good to be alive, good to be involved in the dance of life, and good to be here now. I throttled all day, ticking down the 728 miles until arriving home. The heat ramped up to an oven-baking temperature of 96. There were caravans after caravans of electrical utility trucks, tree trimming crews, and rescue response teams heading south all day. All the resources were being sent and staged in preparation for Hurricane Doreen. As I started to move through more familiar surroundings, the Florida afternoon rainstorms doused me. At 96 degrees, there was no need to put rain gear on. The rain was a welcome occurrence. The realization of the journey ending became very real in the last 30 minutes of riding. The idea of transitioning to a new rhythm back at home and off the road played in my head. The lists of stuff, the relationships, the thoughts of the past and of the future, all flooded my mind as if it was a conditioned response. Thoughts, and more thoughts flooded my head. I was excited to be arriving home, but there was also a range of other feelings. Stop, I had to say. Enough. No more thoughts and no more thinking. As I sat on the bike those last few miles, I caught myself. I was unconscious and thought, but I caught myself. Thoughts and the mental movies were playing in my head. I found my breath on the bike. As I continued riding from the seat on the motorcycle, I sat back down into the moment, into the now. That was the theme of the entire journey. For the briefest of time in those remaining miles, the effortlessness of being in the moment on the road now required some additional diligence. The practice of being in the moment requires a bit more diligence when off the road. I remembered that. I felt the stillness again as I throttled closer to home. I felt waves of gratitude for the journey I was just on and for the continuing journey of my life. I played the song in my helmet, Tomorrow Never Knows, by the Beatles from the album Revolver, as I rode those final miles home. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. Stillness in breath and in being was what I felt. Acceptance of it all, of the isness, and rooted in the now with gratitude and hopefulness. I was joy. I am and I am joyful. As I turned into the driveway of my home, the garage door raised and Jeanette stepped out. Smiles on both our faces with a sense of reunion and a celebration for what is. I was home. These journeys have taught me much and allowed me to experience, feel, and recognize universal truths. Being on the road is a spiritual practice, and it gave me empirical data to feel these universal truths at the core of my being. I was in the moment. The journey was sparked by some need I felt at my core. I knew that this journey, like others, was a catalyst for that inward journey. I knew travel would quicken the experience of awakening to those truths that I held deep within my being. I wasn't running away or to something, but I felt the need to further ignite awareness. More than all other journeys, on this one, I was more deeply immersed in the moment. There was presence and stillness. I was accepting of what is. There were innumerable timeless moments that I was experiencing. There was yoga on a motorcycle, a practice. While it may have felt effortless and natural, there was a deep spiritual practice and physical as well.